What's going on, everybody? I appreciate you checking in. All right, the draft is in the books. I know I'm a few days late. I spent the last few days after the draft kind of going live with not only my guys in the Raider War Room, but as well as other content creators in this space, man. I had a lot of fun going live with all those guys and really chopping it up about the new draft picks that the Raiders added to this roster. And I think the overall consensus is that we're excited. We definitely are excited about the players that have entered this roster for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to give you my overall grade. I'm finally going to kind of break this thing down for you. Again, I haven't been able to make a video on my final thoughts of the draft, but now's my opportunity to do it. And my next video is going to be about the UDFAs that I'm really excited about. But this one, I'm going to finally kind of break down this draft. And so let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think about our first pick of the draft, Ashton Jeanty? And at the same time, who was your favorite pick? Because I'm definitely going to give you mine during this video. And so before we get into it, if you can, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on those notifications. My next giveaway is at 5,000 subscribers. So if you want to be included in that, hit that subscribe button. I definitely appreciate it. And so we're going to jump into it, right? I already did a video on our first overall pick, Ashton Jeanty. There is one thing that I forgot to add in that video, but look, I got to give credit for the Raiders, right? The Raiders, they went and they got their guy. All signs pointed to the Raiders wanting Ashton Jeanty, and they got him. In addition to that, they also got the best player at that position. And when you're sitting at the number 6 pick, you are still in range to be able to get the number 1 player at the position that you're targeting, and they did it, right? That's been my strategy as it relates to the running back position. I don't like getting running backs early in the first round. I'd much rather have seen us trade back. But again, we got Ashton Jeanty. And there's one thing that I forgot to mention in that video was, look, I am cautiously optimistic as it relates to how Jeanty is actually going to be in the National Football League. A lot of people think he's going to be this generational talent. You look at his numbers, you look at the highlights, and yes, I think he's going to be a very explosive player. But again, I'm cautiously optimistic because I'm really curious and I wonder just how well he is going to be able to produce when he consistently for 17 weeks plays against NFL caliber defenses. You know, he played in the Mountain West. He didn't play against the SEC consistently week after week. He didn't play against the Big Ten, those type of defenses. SEC and Big Ten defenses are the best of the best, and they're going to come get you. They're going to come after you week after week. And the question is how well would have Jeanty done in those type of conferences playing week after week? You can say, yes, he'll have a game where he rips off 170, maybe even touches 200 yards, right? But you can look at the Penn State game. I believe he rushed 30 times for 104 yards, right? Averaged about 3.5 yards a carry. And now imagine if he played those type of defenses week after week after week. And again, I'm not saying that he's going to be bad, okay? That's not what I'm putting out there. What I'm saying is I'm cautiously optimistic what his durability is going to look like when he's playing against a Penn State defense times 10 when you go into the National Football League. That's my biggest concern, I guess. And I know this argument has been brought up a couple times. I've heard it a couple times, and I believe it is actually valid. That when you're not seeing that top tier type of competition, you can't get a real gauge as to how well you're going to translate to the NFL. And so, again, cautiously optimistic. I think if we can provide him with quality blocking up front and get him to the second level untouched 4, maybe 5 times a game, I think without question, he can be explosive, and he's going to be able to potentially be that rusher that can end the season around 1,500 to 1,700 yards per year, potentially. All right. He does have that explosiveness. He does have the vision. He has that ability to be able to break tackles, run through tackles. The yards after contact is very impressive. But again, just got to look at the conference and the defenses that he was playing. Would he have been able to still do that if he played in the SEC or the Big Ten where he's playing that top tier talent? Again, just cautiously optimistic. So let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about Ashton Jeanty. And so there, I'm going to pick it up on the big screen, and we're going to go through every single pick. I'm not going to spend too long, but I'm definitely going to let you know who my favorite pick was at the end of this. And so let's move on to round 2. Jack Bech. When the pick was announced, I had question marks, massive question marks, because we have Jacoby Myers, which is a very similar type of receiver. And so when the pick was initially announced, it was definitely a head scratcher, in my opinion. Similar to what I stated in my video regarding Ashton Jeanty, I had to wait and see how this was going to play out. right? Jack Bech is not going to be that deep threat. I wasn't sure if Jack Bech was going to be that number one receiver that we were trying to target. And so again, I wanted to kind of see things play out. Obviously, he's a solid receiver. He's a very good route runner. He's got extremely good hands. I think he had one drop ball last season. So extremely good hands. And so it's a quality pick without question, but I wanted to just kind of see how the draft was going to play out to see just what role he was going to play in this offense. And that's what, when we get to our fourth overall pick is when it all brings itself together. All right. And then we get into the third round and we snag Darian Porter. All right. Darian Porter, I think, can be a very good corner in the National Football League. I do think we obviously, with Jack Jones leaving, and we did bring in some help through free agency, which I don't think are necessarily day one starters by any means, but they're definitely good competition pieces. We still have a very deep cornerback room. We do have a lot of players, a lot of names in the cornerback room. And so Darian Porter, I think, has the talent, the ability, obviously is the prototypical type of corner that Pete Carroll likes. I think he's definitely going to fight for that starting position day one. And it's going to be exciting to see. He's a tall, lengthy corner, I believe he ran a 4.3 40. And so, again, prototypical type of corner that Pete Carroll likes. And so I am excited to kind of see what he can do. I know a couple guys, a guy that was picked a couple picks later, which is Azariah Thomas. He was definitely a guy that I had high on my draft board. And so at the end of the day, we picked up Darian Porter. Not mad to pick at all. It definitely addressed a need. And I think that we definitely have somebody that can play opposite of Jacorian Bennett and can really start to lock down some of these receivers in the AFC West. And so before I get to the two offensive linemen, I definitely wanted, because we picked Ashton Jeanty, I wanted us to prioritize a guard in the second round. But obviously, we started to move around. All right, we started to move around, and I do think John Spytek and Pete Carroll, they navigated this draft extremely well. As much as I was a big trade back in the first guy to accumulate picks, they eventually traded back in the second round. They're able to accumulate another third, which, credit to them, they're able to actually basically get back that third round pick that we gave away for Geno Smith. And so they recouped that pick, which is actually a brilliant move. You know, it's been a long time since we've been able to see a GM navigate the draft board, navigate this draft the way that he did. So got to give credit to John Spytek for that. But we drop back. As much as I wanted to prioritize a guard in the first round, the second round, the two guards that I really liked was Jonas Savanea as well as Wyatt Millum. When we traded back that first time in the second round, Jonas Savanea was picked by Miami in that spot that we traded away from, which it was a bummer. But I knew Wyatt Millum was still on the board. But unfortunately, Wyatt Millum went off the board, and then we ended up going with Jack Bech. And so, but again, kind of going to the back end of the third round, we ended up prioritizing the offensive line, which, look, the more and more, Caleb Rogers wasn't on my radar, but John Spytek, the Raiders, they do obviously a million times more research than I can do. But the more and more I looked at Caleb Rogers, it does look like he could potentially be that day one starter with Pete Carroll's son as the offensive line coach. But at the same time, Joe Philbin, I believe, is still part of this coaching staff. And we know that he could do some very good things with this offensive line. And so Caleb Rogers, if they did grab themselves a potential player that can find himself starting day one and produce, because in the first three rounds, you're still looking for potential starters. And so if Caleb Rogers does start day one next year and actually does pan out, man, again, more credit to them for being able to trade back, maneuver the way they did, and snag Caleb Rogers. So again, potentially could be our starting guard next season. And next up, right after that was Charles Grant. Charles Grant, I think, is a project with a lot of high upside, and it's going to be very interesting to see just how we deal with Colton Miller moving forward. We didn't offer him extension prior to the offseason activity starting. I know that there was rumors that he wants an extension. More power to him. I'm always an advocate for players getting their money, but Charles Grant, again, very raw. I do think he needs a lot of coaching to be able to develop into a potential starting caliber tackle, but he's got all the attributes. You just watch the film, you can tell that he eventually turned into a tackle that could battle for a starting position with the right coaching. And so I'm excited to see what Charles Grant can develop into. I don't think he's a starter this coming season. I do think it's going to take a full season, which is interesting, because if we don't extend Colton Miller and we walk away from him, Charles Grant might be the replacement. Don't know if that's the intention, but it very well could be. And you pick him that high, you draft him that high, again, round 3, with the mindset that he could potentially be a starter at some point in his NFL career, and hopefully it is fairly soon, depending on what happens with Colton Miller. So again, with our first 3 rounds, we picked 4 players, and let me know what your thoughts are on our first, second, and third round picks. And so let's kind of move on to round 4. Round 4 is kind of where that Jack Besh pick made all the sense in the world. We go after Deontay Thornton Jr., and Deontay Thornton was a receiver that I wanted the Raiders to target in the later rounds. All right. And so in the 4th round, I think was perfect value for him, in my honest opinion. I was extremely high on Tederick McMillan. I think he can be one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver to come out in this year's draft. But the reason why I was okay with trading back and maybe still grab him, but if we missed out on him, I wouldn't have been too disappointed, because I do think guys like Deontay Thornton, I like Savion Williams, Torrey Horton, Pat Bryant, those type of receivers, taller, fast receivers. I think that they fit what this offense needs to kind of bring a whole different aspect to it, right? We need a deep threat. We need a taller receiver that can get downfield, that as long as we just throw it to him once, maybe twice, 40 yards downfield, and just show that we're attempting to go deep. But man, if you can imagine hitting this kid once or twice deep downfield, the amount of space that Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, even a Trey Tucker can just work underneath. And now that you can prove to defenses that we can threaten downfield, not only is that going to help all of our other receivers and all of our possession type of receivers, but it's now going to lighten up the box for Ashton Jeanty to do work. And so now you can't crowd the box with the safety walking up. Now you got to drop 2 safeties. Now you're going to run more of a cover 3, maybe even a cover 4. All right. And so you're going to find yourself with a lighter box. And now you let your first round draft pick do some work with a lighter box, which again, I think now with the Deontay Thornton pick, and I think with his speed and his height advantage over the majority of corners that he's going to go up against, I think adds a completely different element to this offense that is going to help this offense kind of find its identity, but also thrive at every level. And so let me know what your thoughts are on that number 4 pick, Deontay Thornton. Now, next, with Spytek kind of navigating this draft, we were able to acquire another 4th round draft pick. We ended up going with Tonka Hemingway, which when I heard the name announced, a little bit of a head scratcher. I want us to go after a linebacker fairly early, because I do think this linebacker room needs some help. I had Tonka Hemingway, in my opinion, possibly a player that would have dropped a little bit later in the draft. I think getting him in the 4th round was a little early. And so, look, he's an absolute athlete. Half of his damn highlights are him running the ball and scoring touchdowns. Okay, so he is an athlete. I do think that he's going to be a good competition piece in this defensive line room. And if we do have some injuries, then look, I do think that he's going to be able to compete and provide competition. And it's always good to have a solid rotation, keep those interior defensive linemen fresh so that we can continue get after these AFC West quarterbacks and all the opponents that we play against next season. Also, one last thing about Tonka Hemingway. One thing I did is kind of a head scratcher. Again, when we did announce the pick, the thing was there was an interior defensive lineman that was a little bit higher on my radar, and that was Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. I do think that he is going to be exactly kind of what we needed on this interior defensive line. One guy that we really don't have is a bigger defensive lineman to kind of be that true run stopper on short yardage type of downs. And so that's why, again, Tonka Hemingway was a little bit of a head scratcher. I'd liked Joshua Farmer at that spot, but this is the route that we went. So again, let me know what you think about Tonka Hemingway. But again, the way that John Spytek was able to navigate this draft and the way that he methodically kind of moved, we didn't have a 5th rounder, but as we entered the 6th, we followed it up with another interior defensive line pick, JJ Piggies. And look, I really like JJ Piggies. I think where we got him was exactly where his value was. He's a bigger interior defensive lineman. I just talked about Joshua Farmer. I think JJ Piggies could be that bigger interior defensive lineman that could help us out in that area, more of that run stopper, pure run stopper. He's also extremely athletic, man. You look at some of his highlights, he's also carrying the football a little bit for Ole Miss down on the goal line and short yardage type of plays. And so there is a good chance that he could be a very athletic interior defensive lineman. Again, more competition, and you can't hate the fact that we're getting a lot of rotational pieces, again, in case of an injury, but at the same time, let's keep these interior defensive linemen fresh. Keep them fresh so they can continue to get in that backfield and wreak havoc on these quarterbacks in the AFC West. And so that's my biggest thing. And the one thing we also need to kind of keep in mind is the majority of these quarterbacks, right? You got the Bo Nixes, you got the Patrick Mahomes, not so much Justin Herbert, but they're both athletic quarterbacks. They're going to run around. They're going to move. So let's get some athletic interior defensive linemen and get after these guys. All right. Close the distance as quickly as possible with these athletic interior defensive linemen and really cause havoc. So I do like the route that they went. Again, Tonka Hemingway a little bit early, but let me know thoughts are on JJ Piggies and that pick in the 5th round. Now let's jump to the 6th round, guys. And these were head scratchers. I'll be dead honest right from the beginning. Guys that I didn't even know who they were as soon as they were picked, but you got Tommy Mallet as well as Cam Miller. Both quarterbacks, but obviously once you do some research, you know that Tommy Mallet's going to most likely transition to a receiver position. I think that's how he's going to enter the NFL, as a receiver. And the more and more you watch your highlights, look, if the Raiders can get something out of this kid, I do think that he has a chance to battle for a slot receiver position. I mean, I believe he ran under a 4.4 40. He was just shy of a 4.4, so he's got the speed. You could see when he takes off and runs, he has the athletic ability to be dynamic once he has the ball in his hands. Now, I don't know how good of a route runner he is because he was a quarterback, and so we'll kind of see how that plays out. But one spot where I think he can find himself a true role on this team is as a returner, whether it be punt returner or kick returner. When you watch him in open space, he maneuvers extremely well in open space. He's got the vision to make plays, make something out of nothing, those type of things. And so where I think he could easily find himself a role on this team, and watch out, Dylan Labe, our I believe our 6th rounder last year, he might be able to step up and be that premier kick returner for us. And you got to remember that those new kickoff rules. Then with the new kickoff rules, there's been an increased amount of kickoff returns just this last season. And so if Tommy Mallet does find himself as that premier kickoff returner, he might be carrying the ball 15, 16, 17 times next season. And when you can put the ball in somebody's hands 15 to 17 times, maybe even in upwards of 20, that's 20 opportunities that you can show that you provide value to this roster and have a big impact as it relates to our starting field position multiple times a game. All right. And so field position plays a huge role throughout the course of a football game. And if you can win the field position battle, you find yourself potentially having a better chance at success week in and week out. And so having a good returner back there can definitely help out this team next year, especially with the new kickoff rules. And let's jump to Cam Miller. Obviously, he's going to be a quarterback, more of a mobile quarterback. You're getting a quarterback in the 6th round. Again, a guy that I'd never had on my radar. But look, at the end of the day, let's just see how he battles. Obviously, you got Carter Bradley still on this roster. He's obviously going to battle with Carter Bradley. I think when you go back and look at Carter Bradley's film, I think Carter Bradley may be just a little bit better pure passer as it relates to Cam Miller, but I think Cam Miller definitely beats him in the athletic department. And so, but not saying that Carter Bradley can't move or can't extend plays. I do think he can, but Cam Miller is definitely dynamic with his feet, and he can, without question, make plays with his legs. Again, we'll kind of see how it plays out, and obviously it's going to be a pretty interesting camp battle, but I will say it's going to make the preseason games just that much more fun to watch. And so let me know what your thoughts are on the 2 back-to-back quarterbacks. Actually, last thing, what I will say about us picking those quarterbacks, a lot of people might say they were kind of head scratchers, and the only way that I could truly, if I get in the mind of John Spytek and Pete Carroll, is you traded back and you accumulated quite a few draft picks. And here's the thing, is that we had 8 draft picks prior to picking up Tommy Mallet and Cam Miller. And when you have that many draft picks that early in the draft, now you maybe can look at because we picked these guys in the back end of the 6th round. So it's essentially an early 7th round, I guess you can say. My belief and my feeling is that the Raiders picked up these guys mainly because they didn't want to see them hit the undrafted free agency list. I don't think they wanted to get in that bidding war. Obviously, these guys being quarterbacks, Tommy Mallet being, a very versatile player, obviously going to play receiver for us. I don't think the Raiders want them to get to the undrafted free agency list and get into that bidding war. All right. And so because you've already had 8 draft picks prior to them, I think that kind of gave them the luxury to go after these guys, snag them, don't don't let them get to the undrafted free agency list and you get them on this roster. And so maybe that was the move. Just don't let them get out of the draft. So again, that's just kind of my thought process as it relates to those guys and why they picked them where they did. Because as soon as I heard their name, my first thought was, man, those are undrafted free agents. Why'd you get them? But maybe that's the reason why. And so let's kind of drop to the very last pick, Cody Lindenberg. Here's kind of my bold take with Cody Lindenberg. I was actually a very big fan of him. I was targeting him the start of the 6th round. I thought that's kind of where he might have gone. But for him to land and be there in the 7th round, I think it's a hell of a pick. If you watch Cody Lindenberg's game film, I do think that he has a very good chance of competing in this linebacker room. All right, you got Devin White. It remains to be seen kind of what Devin White we're going to get. Landon Roberts, I think he has a very good chance of being the starter, but we didn't pay him starter money. It's a 1 year, $3 million deal. That's not starter money. And then you got Tommy Eichenberg that we still don't know what we truly have out of him. And after that, it's a lot of guys that are unproven. And so you're bringing Cody Lindenberg, and again, you watch his film, you watch his tape. I think that he has a really good chance of competing in this linebacker room and potentially shocking a lot of people and finding himself on the field on Sundays, on the grass, potentially with this starting unit. If not, getting himself some decent playing time throughout the game. Again, if someone goes down and he will find himself that spot and produce, I do think that he could battle and maybe shock some people and find himself on the grass on Sundays. But at the very minimum, I think he's one hell of a special teams pickup. Again, because of the kickoff rules, you need good size athletic linebackers that can be on those kickoff and kick return teams because of just the way that it's designed now. And so again, I love the Cody Lindenberg pick. Let me know in your comment section down below what you think of that pick. And so I'm going to kind of go back up to the big screen. That kind of sums it up for me. I kind of broke down the picks and just kind of how I feel about them. But now I'm going to tell you exactly who my favorite picks were. And so look, in my opinion, I do think the Deontay Thornton is my most favorite pick. It's my favorite pick of the draft because I think, not because I think that he's going to all of a sudden just blow up the stat sheet with crazy stats. No, I think what he is going to provide is that final piece that's going to open everything up for this offense. All right. And that's what I wanted to target. That's why I was high on T-Mac. I thought T-Mac could have been that piece. But again, because of the receivers that I saw in the later rounds, I was like, go ahead and trade back, compile some additional draft capital, and then maybe get a receiver in the 4th round. Well, we definitely got ourselves a receiver in the 4th round, and Deontay Thornton was one of the guys that I wanted to target, and we got him. But again, I think he is my favorite pick because of what I think he's going to provide to this offense and open everything up and allow Chip Kelly to take advantage of all the weapons that we now have on this offense. And if I can kind of give 2 kind of runner-ups, I think Carlos Rogers, because I want us to prioritize a guard in that 2nd round, because I want to give Ashton Jeanty every single asset to find success. I want us to prioritize a guard. Wasn't in the 2nd, but we did prioritize one in the top 3 picks, in the top 3 rounds, which again, in the top 3 rounds, you still find day 1 starters. As long as he works out, I'm happy with it. And so it does seem like we did get ourselves someone that could potentially be a starter. And then honorable mention, Cody Lindenberg, for all the reasons that I stated just a few minutes ago. So I appreciate you. Let me know your thoughts on all the picks. Finally, I'm going to give you my grade. I'm going to give this a B. That's my grade on this draft. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic with Ashton Jeanty, but they did get the number 1 player at that position. They did maneuver a lot in the draft, which I really like. We did address the offensive line. We got ourselves potentially a number 1 corner. We finally got that potentially number 1 receiver deep threat. Think because with that Deontay Thornton pick, I think Alex Besh, we're going to get the best out of him. It's going to be able to showcase what he truly can do in this offense. But then we also got some depth as well as some athletic pieces on this defensive line for rotational purposes as we go on into the season. So look, I think they navigated extremely well, and I'm excited for this draft class. We hit a lot of needs, and that's why I give it a solid B. So let me know in the comment section down below what's your final grade for the 2025 NFL Raiders draft class. And so I apologize for the long video. My next video is going to be about all the UDFAs that we picked up. I have about 3 or 4 more that I got to do some research on, but I will hit you with the video on that as soon as I'm done, which will be probably in the next day or 2. But remember, make sure you hit that notification bell because I do go live with my guys in the Raider War Room, but I also go live with other guys in this space to kind of show my support and chop it up with them. And so appreciate you. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on those notifications. My next giveaway is at 5,000 subscribers. So if you want to be included, hit that sub button. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you sticking with me on this long video. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out of here.